Welcome to Movies, Films, and Flicks. I am Mark Hoffmeyer, and joining me is a man who believes that there's a thorn on every rose. It's Adam Clement.
Happy Halloween.
What do you think?
Bad.
I
mean, I should have figured it would have something to do with the movie, so...
I mean, it works, right? There's a thorn, or every rose has its thorn. Huh?
I suppose I just failed to see the poison connection.
So a once beautiful film, Halloween, gets some weird thing introduced in the second film, right? Gets something weird in the second film, and then the fifth film, there's a man in black who turns out to be a member of the cult of Thorn.
Yes.
So it was a rose that has a thorn.
I mean, you could have just said, as a once respected film like Halloween would go on, it would grow, perhaps, right? And then develop a thorn along the way, which I suppose would count as 5 and 6 in this case.
I like 5.
We know why, and we don't need to get into it. We've done an entire pod about it. We're moving on with our lives.
I thought you would get the thorn thing, though, immediately and be like, Mark, you're too good. And you just came up with that on the fly. Kudos.
I'm sorry, I'm too simple for you.
Yeah, jeez Louise. But no, good to have you back. I mean, we're talking about Halloween 6.
So we're talking about Halloween 666.
6, you're right, 666. And the
or
curse of
any
Michael
one of the many other titles this had during its cursed production.
The Curse of Michael Myers was a placeholder as a joke. And the guy's like, yeah, I'll change it. And then he kept it in.
I believe this, but I don't know if I believe it.
I
think that's like a running joke, but I don't know at what point in this, again, cursed production that they just said, oh, hell with it, and went with that. Because I believe, if you can find it, this is available, by the way, I don't know what version you have, Mark, on the box set version that was released, I think, in like 2012 or so, that if you, the teaser originally released was the origin of Michael Myers, which is a bit less spooky.
I mean, I read an interview with the writer, Daniel Farran, where he said...
Daniel Farran's, yeah.
Daniel Farran's, where he said that about the curse of Michael Myers, or do you think he's just bitter?
I don't think he's bitter at all, actually. He's pretty... I think he is proud of what he put into it, but I think, in not speaking and listening to anybody who's involved in those... I say those movies because there's sort of different cuts, as we'll get into, but I think, he walked away grateful for the experience, but maybe less than pleased with how the studio sort of manipulated, interfered. The studio being, of course, Miramax, Harvey Weinstein, who,
Yeah, he did.
Less said about him, the better.
There's a lot of weird chin stuff in this movie because of them dang those guys, those men who said that stuff. Now, this movie, he had to hunt down the footage, but then he didn't find the footage. He just found the footage, and they were going to release it with, like, the VHS kind of sound. But then they had to hunt down the sound for it somewhere else.
The original audio.
Yeah, so this is a years-long process. It's not as bad as Event Horizon, that, the extra scenes were found in a Transylvanian salt mine. But he had to hunt all this down to put it together, and then Scream Factory put together a pretty nice little version of it.
Scream Factory did a good job, and let's just to clarify, we are, of course, I think anybody listening to this is probably hip to it, but, not just Halloween 6, of course, but the Halloween 6 producer's cut, which, of course, as a 12-year-old kid, I definitely had on bootleg VHS because that was the only way you could have it for a while. I had to buy it off a fan site.
All right, so let's talk about this. You were big, and we've talked about this before in the pod, but you were into Halloween when you were younger and you were on these message boards and you were reading about this stuff. What was like, what did you think this producer's cut was going to be to you? Did it take on like a very was it like the runes in this? Was it like a magical thing?
Well, yeah, I mean, to your point, I was a pretty common frequenter to all the like fan sites, the Myers house and all that, the Ultimate Halloween message board. But when this was discussed in those circles, it was something of a mythic entity, its own sort of legend, because nobody really had access to it, right? There wasn't any distribution for it. So you did have to buy it through a certain guy who knows a guy. And yeah, I had it on VHS. There was sort of a makeshift cover, and it was sort of the old school snap covers. But it was a work print quality. So I think I knew sort of what I was getting into, because the sites were pretty good about documenting the changes. Although that came in the form of like screenshots and a couple text blurbs. So you didn't really get the depth, right, you get from the DVD, which is out now. And I don't remember, I mentioned the box set. I think that came out in 12 or 13, and that was the first time that this producer's cut really saw a legal, valid mainstream distribution on home video.
And you got a commentary on it. I bought a Blu-ray of it, and I didn't get a commentary on it.
Yeah, that's weird, actually. It's kind of a bummer. I would be surprised why they wouldn't even bother to put that on there.
I was looking through all the, sometimes it's in this sound selections where you can kind of do sound or like
right.
setup.
Audio tracks,
yeah. I was like, is it there? No? Is it here? No?
Huh.
So, but
yeah,
I mean, there's so much about this movie, though. I mean, there's so many interviews and articles and comparisons and.
Oh, sure.
I mean, this is nuts because this movie, right? It's not good, right? The original cut, it's not a good movie. It was what, 95 when it came out? 1995?
Yeah, that sounds right.
And so, why did a producer's track or a cut? Why was that so? You thought maybe it could be better?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of history to it, and I know you sort of did your homework as well, but as I have it, it seems like the studio screened it. And this, again, it bears repeating, as if it wasn't obvious already. The Halloween franchise was up to that point a relatively independent operation. Mustafa Akkad ran it sort of like a family business. And Six, this movie, really was the first time a major studio got involved, right? So you had Dimension, Miramax, all those guys, and they tested it with an audience, and it didn't hit the mark. And I think a lot of that was probably the producer's cut. So naturally, they had some suggestions, notes, what have you, and it felt very much like an Exorcist 3 scenario for me personally, because as much as I enjoy both versions, I gotta say, I strike me down. I think some of the changes are actually kind of exciting, and maybe for that reason, because it's so 90s. Like, you watch the movie and you're right, it's by no means top tier quality content, but it is so just reflective of the era, right? Like that MTV grunge, over the top effects, right? Like, you almost expect Beavis or Butthead to show up. So I don't know, we can get into that in a bit, but I do appreciate some of the over the top touches that were added.
Now, the one thing I like, there's definitely some very good gore in the theatrical cut. I mean, Jamie Lloyd's death on like a hay grinder is gnarly, as composed to the man in the iron mask, the black mask, the black hood,
the Man in Black, yeah,
Man in Black, Johnny Cash silencing her in the hospital.
She gets killed twice basically. Michael sort of disposes her in the farm barn, whatever, and it's just like, all right, well, I guess she's done. And that's such a crap way to go. I mean, look, this movie, the producer's cut, has its defenders. You cannot tell me either of those deaths, right? Your point about the Man in Black shooting her with the silencer in the hospital, you cannot defend either one of those as being a respectful death for that character. And, the people who disagree will say, wow, having her gored up in some farm equipment is no better. And I'm like, well, it's more memorable.
I mean, Danielle Harris did the right thing by not coming back for
well,
this.
she wanted to. She wanted to real bad. And it was a money thing, and I think that's well storied as well. But it's a bummer what they did to her. She really did want to come back, and I think that was a lousy way to end things. But hey, we got her back in a zombie movie.
I think it saves her character, though. So a lot of people see it, and they're like, that's not my Jamie. Does that make sense? Like, so
it does, but I'm not super hot on that sort of fandom, rather, for the actress. I mean, I love Danielle Harris. I think she absolutely carried Halloween 4 and 5. But I thought J.C. Brandy, who was her replacement, did a serviceable job.
I thought she was really good, Danielle Harris, in Rob Zombie's films too. There's a couple scenes where I was watching her and I'm like, she's a lot better than this material.
Oh, sure. Yeah, she was acting outside, I think, her pay grade. But that's my personal opinion. I think anybody who has talked to me about this stuff understands I think super highly of the Rob Zombie movies, but I do agree she was one of the better parts.
I saw her in a scene, I think it was maybe she was in a bathroom, I think, and
that's part 2. Yeah.
I was like, she's really good in this scene. Like, no, I don't even remember it much. I just remember her maybe yelling. I don't know. I blocked that movie out of my memory, but I just I really like her. I also like that the theatrical cut is 8 minutes shorter.
Oh, is it? I didn't actually realize that.
Which is really great for me because watching both of these is not fun.
Well, I'll ask you because I've already sort of let the cat out of the bag on my opinion. Which one do you prefer?
Oh, gosh. Okay.
I mean, you're just talking about the changes, right? Let's be real here for a minute. 60% of this movie is relatively the same. The gist of it's the same. You get the ending, which is incredibly... both endings are completely just beyond plausibility and reality. But I'll take Michael Myers going ham, butchering all the doctors with a machete, which, by the way, why is there a machete in the surgery room? I'll take that and, being beat up by Paul Rudd with a pipe over this. What is the line he says? I want to get this right. And I wrote it down in the producer's cut. Paul Rudd as Tommy Doyle, introducing Paul Rudd, by the way, is one of his first roles besides Clueless, says, quote, "The power of the runes stopped him." I'm not kidding. That's a real line. That's how the movie ends. So I don't know. I, for one, will always favor partially, or at least a little bit, over the producer's cut.
And he finds those rocks in his pockets. And he just
we
goes,
don't really know where those came from. He's sort of just had those for a while, I guess.
And then you just have Michael standing, and then you have Michael changing outfits.
Yeah, also a very hard thing to suspend my disbelief on.
It's just, okay, if I had to do it all over again, I'd just watch the theatrical cut, 8 minutes shorter. That, I don't know why, and I don't know if it's anything up against, I just can't stand the parents, Deborah and,
really?
Like, I can't stand those two.
Deborah? No, wait, finish that thought.
John and...
It's Deborah and John.
Oh, I can't stand them. I mean...
Okay, but come on, you can see the reference, right?
Oh, yeah, Carpenter and Deborah Hill.
Yeah, people miss that, and it's funny to me, but I think Farrens had to clarify that he didn't mean any ill will by naming the horrible dad John, but yeah, I like that note.
I mean, it's just, that guy, it's just such, like, evil, weird caricature. He's just slapping her around.
But you want that in, like, a horror movie like this, and that's what I mean when I say the 90s stuff. Like, you always have those one or two characters. This is a big thing in Child's Play movies. You always have those horrible, devious, devilish characters that you kind of root to be offed. And he definitely gets his.
I've never liked that. I really have. No, I hate it when people cheer. The only time
That's fair. But there's no one guilty pleasure where you're like, oh man, that character, like the Green Mile or whatever, Percy. You don't sort of root for him to get his just rewards.
I mean, that makes sense.
Desserts.
I see that.
Yeah.
But that character, I guess in these movies though, these guys are just such caricatures. Like, so you're spending 10 minutes with this terrible guy, and then he dies in 30 seconds. It's not catharsis to me. In the Green Mile, when that dude gets his, he gets his. So
sure, that's fair. That's fair.
It's just, but watching that build, and then the mom, I don't know that Kim Darby. I'm not saying anything. Just maybe the way her character was written, but her crawling through the sheets, which we've talked about before, but just a weird, I mean, I guess she's grown up in a house where she's been abused constantly by her husband, so she would be a less, like, she would be like that, but it's just such, I don't know. And then she just starts crawling through sheets, and then there's an axe and blood sprays on a sheet.
That's interesting, because when I hear other people talk about it, even the people who hate this movie and myself personally, I find that that's my favorite sequence in the movie, because it's got all the elements that I want in a Halloween sequel, right? It's got the atmosphere and the mood and the dread. And honestly, it could have been strung out a little bit more and longer, but, there's that sense of, oh, she's being watched, something's off. It's, she's in the house that, Myers used to be in, and the Strode house, excuse me, is that the Strode house? Or no, this is the Myers house. It's the Myers house. And yeah, there's a little bit of a disconnected, it works on its own bottle episode type of mini arc. The stranger in the house, she doesn't realize until it's too late, of course, that this place is got a history. And then, once she's starting to wise up, what's the call she gets from the man in black? He goes, "We want the child," or something. And it's like, she turns around, sees Michael, and then there's a chase. But I don't know. I like the sequence for what it is, especially seeing her sort of sprint in her joggers, right, in her track pants.
I don't know.
But the parents don't do it for you. That's totally fine. I think Bradford English, I think that's his name. I think he played a really smarmy, great, quote-unquote, abusive father type. And I don't know. Seeing his head explode was kind of fun.
I mean, he oozes intimidation. I guess I'm not knocking the performances, just the character. I do like in the producer's cut when what's the guy's, he's the best. They have that shirt that talks about him. I have his name in here, but I can't find it. The shock jock. Yeah, Barry.
Barry, yeah.
I like that he goes into the wrong van. And Michael's just there.
That's so weird. Yeah, they didn't really bother to, edit that for clarity.
And Michael's just kind of like, oh, all right, this guy's dead.
Well, not only does he get into the wrong van, he gets into the Smith's Grove Sanitarium van, and it's like, no, that's not how life works. That's not how anybody gets it. No, that's just, you don't do it. And it's funny you mentioned Barry. I think the guy